Rick, if you'll give me the go ahead to start recording.
Okay, we are, I'm showing 2 o'clock, so let's start recording. Okay, so I've got Sam, Jim, Fox, Kathy, Clark, Jim Adams, Jerry, and Steve here. Randy Romines, are you online? There, oh, I see him coming on now. Hi, Randy. Okay, so Randy is here. So it looks like all board members are present and accounted for. So we have a quorum. So we really only have 2 items on the budget or on the agenda. One is our COVID-19 response, where we stand on that. And then secondly is the begin on our budgeting process. Is that right, Charlie? Anything else on the agenda? Okay. All right. Let's see. Charlie, why don't you start us off with what you're thinking right now on the COVID-19 response? You'll have to unmute.
Yeah, I thought I could do it a certain manner. Actually, what I'd like to do is defer to Dr. David Porter. Dave had just put together a document about an hour ago and circulated it with the group. So Dave, would you take over and give us an update, please?
All right. Sorry about the late arrival of my email, but part of that's because the Texas Health and Human Services Department gets their statistics out at noon every day. Their statistics are important right now because Dallas County is 731 cases today. Yesterday, they were 620. So Dallas is ahead of Dallas, Houston. The metropolitan areas are all ahead on their curves. So they're going to start seeing numbers go up, not just because of population, but their population makes them more at risk to have the infection get started quicker and rise faster, much like we've seen with New York. The other 4 counties are Fort Worth, Tarrant County, Denton County, and Collins County, which is Plano, Frisco, McKinney, Allen, Prosper, all that area. And you can see by their numbers, they're lower than Dallas, but those combined 4 counties are the top 8 counties in Texas. Dallas is number 2. Fort Worth's 4, Denton is 5, and I think Collins is 8 right now. So that's a total of about 1,400 cases right now out of 4,600, which is 30%. So the point of that is the largest metropolitan area, Houston, is probably slightly larger than Dallas, but this large area is just south of our community. And Dallas in particular is going to be the one that's going to have the most cases and start to have the upswing on those curves I've previously shown you of models. Texas is predicted to peak in literally early May. Now, places like Houston and Dallas are going to peak a little bit before that, like in late April. So we have a window of opportunity that we're going to need to discuss regarding quarantine. The quarantine for this virus is 14 days. The previous viruses, the SARS virus, the first SARS virus, H1N1, they only had to have a 10-day quarantine because of the way those viruses function. This particular virus tends to have a longer incubation period, and that's why it's extended out to 14 days. You can see in the notes that 99% of people become symptomatic in 14 days. Most of them will become symptomatic starting around the 5th day, and then it stretches on out to 14 days. One of the things I want to talk with you about is a traveler's quarantine. Basically, you've seen that already when people came back from Wuhan and went into California, and those folks were required to be in quarantine for 14 days so they could be observed to see who was going to get infected. And after 14 days, they felt that if you weren't symptomatic by then, you were okay to leave. If you get sick, you need to understand that that quarantine is going to last longer. The average lifespan of the illness is around, on average, 18, 19 days. So once you get sick, you're going to have a longer quarantine after that until you test negative. I think one of the most important things that's just starting to be discussed, and as all of you on the board know from our conversations previously, we don't have the data we need, because we're not going to have good data for probably about 6 to 12 months until we get data from the United States. Europe and China are just not being able to generate it. And there's a reason for that. And that is because we're kind of in the middle of a storm right now. And that's just not on their radar to be worried about those particular issues. But they're starting to talk now about 20 to 25% of people showing no symptoms, and 20 to 25% of people having symptoms like allergies, which is pretty much most of the people in North Texas have allergies. So about 40 to 50% of people may not be aware that they have an infection because they have no symptoms or they have very mild symptoms. That's a big problem. If you don't know you're infected, you've heard me talk about having an abundance of caution. That goes without saying. I think you've heard me say we have people running around trying to prevent themselves from getting infections, and we should have people running around actually feeling like you've got the infection and not wanting to give it. I mean, we need to be very cautious, and that's what all the social distancing is about. Our hospitals in Texas in late April and early May are probably going to be overwhelmed. According to most of the models, we're not going to have enough beds. Most of those beds are south of us. I mean, they really are, all of them. And they're going to get full probably before we start having significant illness in this community. So we really need to try to prevent it, because if somebody gets ill here in May, there may not be ventilators and ICU beds available in the Dallas Metroplex. So having said that, I really think we're going to have to consider recommending a 14-day traveler quarantine, just like we did on people who were coming back from China. And it probably should be for all guests entering the community. That means that they're going to have to stay in the home of the member and not be out in the community. They should be housed in quarantine at that person's home. I'd recommend that property owners who live outside the community, people we call weekenders, also have 14-day travel quarantines. And that's going to restart every time they go home and come back from their community. This is all going to be very problematic for everyone, but we're in the middle of this and there's not really any way around it. The other people that I'd recommend is that we temporarily suspend the guest privileges for all facilities. There's really, if they're not following the quarantine, they sure as heck better not be out in the facilities contaminating other people in the community. I think that we need to inform the members of our community that we still have people who provide essential services. And by the recent executive order, those people still need to go to work. We have people who work in hospitals from our community and travel to the hospitals. And I know most of those people who have been at the most severe risk, they've actually been in quarantine. We have a member who's a nurse in an ICU in our community who lives here. Her parents live here. She has her children staying with her parents, and she's not getting to see her children. Her husband also is involved in the health industry, and they're quarantining in our community, and they don't see anybody, including their family. And it's going to get to that level in the next 3 weeks for all of us. We're going to have to pay attention to what we're doing. And if we don't, and we start to get the virus in here, then everybody in the community will be quarantined in their own houses. Probably the most difficult thing that you all may want to consider discussing is the outside workers that come into our community. And it varies from contractors to yard workers to housekeepers to even some of our employees. And that's a pretty long discussion. You might want to discuss that later or under executive session. But those are my main recommendations, is that the board really needs to figure out when they want to do this. I think you can see from how the governors have piecemeal across the United States slowly done this. Sooner is better. And I would say it either needs to be done now or within the next week, because we're still slightly ahead of the curve, but things are starting to go up now. For sure, they're going up in Dallas and the place where we have visitors and part-time homeowners here. Those people are coming in from those areas. Do y'all have any questions about that?
Hey, Dave, this is Rick. So let's say we have weekenders. They come in and they want to ride around the lake in their boat. When you say, I mean, that's the primary thing they're going to come up here for on the weekend, I would guess. Does that still meet your criteria when you say a weekender's quarantine?
Actually, it
Assuming they're
doesn't.
by
You know,
themselves.
when people came over here from China, even though they were asymptomatic, they didn't tell them, you know, you guys go walk around. Now, they were housed in areas together, and they did do social distancing, but it will require them to be very conscientious. If somebody has a boat and it's at their house, they've got to go to the boat ramp, get it in, get it out. So the more you minimize people's contact, the less likely we are to transmit infection. So the board will have to establish, if you want to put parameters on the quarantine, you can make it anything you want, but at some point it's no longer a quarantine.
Okay, thanks. Other board members got questions for Dave there?
Hi, this is Jim. Dave, thanks for the presentation. I think you make very compelling points, especially as we look forward for the next few weeks. My only concern about some of the recommendations is how would we police that? So it's really a board discussion about how we would enforce it or police it, or to make sure other than making recommendations. And then to the point about community, to the people coming in and out of the community that actually own a property here, we probably need to get some legal consultation to talk about that, since they own the property and are members here.
I think those concerns are all valid concerns. I think I mentioned before, I view my role as an advisory role to you all, and my concern is the safety, and actually primarily the safety, this may sound harsh, but primarily the safety of the people, the 40% of people who are over 60 years old in this community. I actually try to treat myself like I have the virus, and I don't want to kill anybody. I just don't want to have to deal with that. I don't want to ever think that I did something that shortened somebody's life. I don't view that as a trite statement. I think it's important that all of us understand our demographics in this community. It's different. And I think a lot of people do understand the demographics. There are always going to be people that will not follow rules. And I don't think there's any way we can police everybody in the community. We're not set up to do that. We're not China. We're not a totalitarian regime here. We don't function that way. But when I get a question from Rick that says, well, can we bend the quarantine a little bit to let people do things? That's the easiest policing. You set up, this is what a quarantine is. You're welcome to come here and enjoy your home. We just don't want you out in the community because we don't want to start this infection here and have to deal with some of the problems they deal with, as we've seen in places like New York. We're doing a good job. We don't have a subway here, so we're not gonna massively infect people. But these viruses are very insidious, and once they get started in the community, we will have to shut everything down. And we may actually wind up having to put all of the people who live here in quarantine as well. So my goal is to try to minimize the possibility of that, even though it creates a lot of discomfort. And you know, this isn't easy. I mean, ask people from New York, they're not having fun.
Okay. Other questions for Dave? Thoughts? Clark?
When do we want to discuss this? I think that, I think these are some, matter of fact, I'm probably a little more stronger than Dave is right now at doing some things that I think we need to do. So are we going to discuss these anytime soon?
Well, we can do it now, or we could, after the budget talks, go into like an executive session.
It's fine, whatever y'all want to do. I just think this needs to be talked about.
Right.
Really.
Les and Charlie, does this type of thing merit executive session?
Yeah, and I am recommending that you pick a date to start doing these things. The acceleration level is going to go up dramatically in the community south of us over the next week. And as we've learned, when you wait to see people starting to die, that's a little late to try to intervene. So probably talking about this later would be better.
Sam. Unmute. Sam needs to unmute.
We finish the budget, we go into executive session to discuss the virus situation.
Okay, that's what you propose. Is that what you said?
Well, I'm just saying I agree with Clark, and I think that's what we should probably do.
Okay. All right. Let's plan on that. Just
I'm not sure. I mean, we can ask Les. I'm not sure that executive session is the right term for discussing new rules. Executive session. So yeah, I mean, that means we're just going to shut it off and it'll be just this group of the board members. So I'm just raising that point.
Les, can you opine on that for us?
I unmuted Leslie, so he should be good to go.
You know, I agree. Normally it wouldn't, but since we're going to be meeting in an executive session to talk about a great many things that are just hypothetical or future deal, I think we can have a closed session discussion, but any decisions we make, we'll have to go back on the record and have them in, have to broadcast any decisions we make in an open record. But to have an open, broad discussion amongst the board members, I think the board members and their legal attorney and their doctor expert can all do some discussion in executive session.
Okay. Okay, so let's do that as our plan. We'll finish the budget workshops. We'll let Dan and Jim Marfus drop off after their parts. We'll have an executive session to kind of lay out our thoughts, topics, possibilities on the virus response, kind of get an idea what decisions we want to make, come back into a regular session, also to be broadcast by Leanne or to recorded by Leanne. And then if we're going to pass any new rules or regulations, we'll do it during that. Sound good? Okay, so let's do that. Dave, do you want to sit here through this budget thing, or you want us to try to add you back in, or what do you want to do? Dave's muted right now. Charlie, can you unmute Dave?
I'm sorry. I'll do whatever y'all like. I can leave my computer on, and then when you're done talking about budget, I'll come back. But yeah,
Okay.
I'll sit here. Okay.
All right. Kathy's probably got your number and could text you or something.
Okay. I think Charlie's got it. Kathy,
Okay.
too. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again for your input.
Thank you.
Okay. So on to the budget. And of course, part of that will be the Lake Management Fund, where Jim Marfus and Dan have joined us for. Charlie, what's your preference as far as when we have Dan and Jim talk about the lake management? You want to give the high level overview first?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let's see if I can get this PowerPoint up and going here. Oop. Okay, can everybody see the PowerPoint?
I can.
I see one thumbs up. Okay. One of the important things to note, and I think everybody understands this, that the calendar year change was approved by our members. So effectively, we're looking at 18 months of budget, July 1st to 2020 through December 31st, 2020 would be effectively a 6-month budget. Then January 1, 2021 to December 31st, 2021 would be a 12-month budget. The run rates would be very similar. So, another way of looking at it, you'd have 3 6-month period. 2 of those 6-month periods would be July through December and would be very similar in terms of expected revenues and expenses. Whatever assessments was decided on would be in effect for the same for that entire 18 months. The preliminary budget must be approved by May the 18th. So I think that gives us about 6 weeks from now. We're in the normal schedule of the budget cycle, the same way we've done it for the last 5 years. So we're on track. It does need to be included in the June communique for the members to be able to review that. We'll then have an open hearing with a 10-day advance notice for the members to be able to review it and then comment. And we typically have done that with the June board meeting. In this case, I think it's very timely. It falls on the 15th of June, so that's plenty of time. And it has to be approved at the absolute very latest by the 29th of June to go into effect. But once again, it could be approved on the meeting on 6/15, or if there's another meeting called after that. Here's just some of the things that are underway or being accomplished in this fiscal year. The pavilion, the spillway engineering has just been kicked off. Road maintenance, we've done that at a high level. Several drainage projects there, East Beach enhancements, and also some extensive tree maintenance in the parks, and then also the golf course. Some of you have seen this chart before. This explains really the POA funding process. The left-hand column there is the funding section. The regular annual maintenance assessments paid by all lot owners. Lodge sales goes in there, other income such as permits, ads, mowing, fees, storage, etc. The sanitation or the garbage removal is just a cost plus 1%, pretty much a pass through. And then lot sales, which we were so successful at several years ago, but has dwindled to very, very low levels now, goes into capital development reserve fund. So in the middle is the allocations. So currently in this fiscal year, the maintenance is $192 per lot per month. Carf on top of that is $24.38. ARF is $39.25, and then the garbage recycle is $15 or $16. And then the guidelines there is the regular O&M maintenance assessment. You can increase it up to 5% with just board approval. Anything above 5% requires community approval. And then ARF is plus or minus 3% with board approval, and then garbage and recycle, I explained that. Here's our assessment history, and I've gone back for the current year and then the 4 years before that. And you can see, really how we were pretty stable there for a while. From 15 to 16, 15, 16 to 16, 17, there was zero increase. We increased the number of lots pretty substantially at that point in time, so there's no increase necessary there. If you look at the increase in 16, 17 to 17, 18, I did also put there was no increase in the basic annual O&M. There was an increase in ARF, but I put in there the bridge at $3.92. And now that's a special assessment. It was obviously voted on and approved by the members, but I put that on there just so you get an idea of the charges that hit most people's bills. If you did do a one lump sum for the bridge, back at that point in time, it was $211. So your bill would be $239.60 minus the $392. So whatever that subtracts out to be. The next year, you can see we actually went up in the O&M and then also went up in the reserve funds, and then ARF went up. So we went up about 4.5% on it. And this past year, 3.7%. So once again, the O&M stayed, actually, I think, got to double check my numbers. I think the O&M went up a little bit there, and then the reserve funds went up, and then ARF went up there too. So you see the 3.7 overall. The far right-hand column, actually what I've done so far, and I'll explain that in a little bit with the next slide or two in terms of forecasting, taking O&M up $2 per member per month. And then I put in the Lake Management Reserve Fund at $12.50 per member per month there. Okay, here's what I had put on that previous one. What I've done is I've done an early draft of a budget. I've gone in there and loaded up the historical information, and it comes up with O&M going up $2 a month, about a 1% increase. No additional headcount on the POA staff, fairly consistent run rate to what we've been running. And that's the, really the supplies, the labor, the things we need to do to keep the lake in the condition it is, and with some improvements. The Human Resource Committee has talked about some recommendations in terms of the retirement accounts, and then also a salary goal of 1%. And I'm putting in there one market adjustment. Trash increase pass through, I think, will be less than a quarter, about 24 cents. We don't know that till really June, but that's pretty typical with what they've run, previous years. So once again, there's some questions, and one of the questions that did came in ahead of time was, why put in the Lake Management Reserve Fund at this point in time? It was voted on by the members. 556 people voted for it, 62.1%. So a strong majority there, almost a super majority voted for it there. It's $12.50 per lot per month, and that would be raise $218,100 per year is what that would do. So let's talk about Carve.
Let's back up just on that one question, though. I'm assuming since we voted on it, we can't override it or delay it or undo it.
That's a good question. That would be a less question, but I think it was recommended by the board and approved by the members. So it would make sense that it goes into effect. Unless,
Great.
yep. And then I'm
Thank
getting to the slides where I'll include Dan and Jim here in a second. The 2021 CARF, which is our Capital Asset Reserve Fund, those will actually include the facilities refurbishment money. It includes the spillway engineering, which is an important aspect of it. That's something that we've already contracted for. It's underway right now. And I just loaded that for purpose of the beginning discussion at $19.88 a month. And that would generate $28,915 per month, or $173,490 for 6 months. So you can take that and multiply it times 3 and see what's available during that entire time period. Here's some carryover issues. With the election last year, the members voted to roll over the surplus. At the last board meeting, $98,500 was moved over to the pavilion funding. That leaves a surplus of $104,362 that can be utilized. There's a reserve fund earmarks, as I call it, the FERF of $193,682. That's meant to be for carpet, painting, roofs, things that are improvements and not assets that would be covered under the ARF. So that's some money that's out there. What was previously known as the Lake Management Reserve Fund will end up this year with a forecasted ending balance of $54,869,000. And then the Dam Spillway Reserve Fund, we are on track to collect $56,500. So in this next fiscal year, actually the first half, we need to budget about $53,000 to be able to complete that whole contract there. So I think that's those are the carryover issues. So now I think it would be time for Jim and Dan to come in and tell us what their plans are, because I think they're specifically want to talk about that $54,869 and then also going forward.
Thanks, guys, for letting us talk to you guys. So I sent a letter to you guys about why we need to keep the previous lake management fund at $3.13 in the $12.50. Did everybody get that?
I did.
You did, Rick?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so what the deal is we just started the lake fund with the $3.13, and that was intended to pay for the clean out of the retention ponds. So the idea was to clean out one every other year, and that would take care of that based on the money we spent previously. So I'm not sure if, we just got a new bid. Rich got one from American Underwater, and it's significantly higher than 50,000. So, that may be an every 2-year deal. So anyway, that's one reason for that. The $12.50 that was just approved, the Lake Management Committee sees that is needed to build up funds for dredging. So if you look at the page 2 that I sent you guys, we had a bid from Dredge America, which is a large nationwide company that does this kind of thing day in and day out. And for Quantico, which is a Kiowa Drive East in Comanche, which we did a little cleanup on the pilot project, their bid to do the whole cove was $375. And the disposal cost to get rid of that was without disposal, is another $200,000. So we're looking at about $570 to do one cove. And that was a bid from 2 years ago, so the price is not going to go down. So at the end of the day, what I'm asking for is, we previously had this money in the budget. I'd like to see that money stay in the budget possibly move to an O&M line item is what I think it needs to be. It's just something we need to do on a yearly basis. And then just, for future things, we have a whole presentation about what we need to do in the future, but one of them is also to build a retention pond by low water one. So that money could help pay for that too. So basically, the money's already in the budget. The people have seen it. I want to emphasize no presentation did we say we're going to not have that money in the budget. That would be like a $9 upsell. So that was we never said that anywhere. So that's what I have to say. Dan, if you want to throw something else in, or if you guys have any questions.
The only other thing I would add is, you got to make decisions on your O&M budget and then all these reserve funds. And what we're just saying is it's going to be a while before we build up enough money in that new reserve fund, the $12 fund, before we can actually do any dredging. But we'd like to show the community we're handling erosion control and cleaning out these ponds and doing some of that stuff as we get ready for the next step. So I would just recommend to the board that they take a look at all those reserve funds and decide what they want to do with those. Obviously, you got to take your capital plan and overlay it to find out really what you need for Carve, because Carve's more, what project do I want to do in the next year or two. But we would like to just see these two funds be left alone and continue to accumulate. That's it.
Thanks, Dan.
So when you say two funds, we've got the existing collected 54,869. And then you're saying the 313 you're looking at is that what you mean by the second fund, or?
Well, continue to collect that money and the 1250.
Right. And do both of those then go into the LMRF?
So we'd have to have Les answer that question, if we can collect money, if we can dump money into that fund. But they would be kind of separated. The one would be for the retention pond clean out, and the other would be strictly dredging. So it'd be like a sub accounts.
So what are you thinking? The 313 a month coming out of O&M would be for the silt pond clean out, and the 1250 would accrue into a dredging fund?
Right, correct.
Well, it's not just silt pond. We've identified a bunch of places that have erosion control issues coming into the lake that aren't from the three main areas. So there'd be some work on those too.
Okay.
Well, this is Clark. Can y'all not see me when I hold my hand up? I guess we're looking at the.
No,
Yeah. When his screen is up there like that, we can only see maybe 5 people.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with needing more money for both of these issues. These questions came up when we were having discussions about the vote. And we were real nebulous in answering those questions and didn't give very clear answers. I get a feeling that the folks that asked those questions during a heavily attended board meeting about what we were going to do with this current $3.13 and what we were going to do with this $54,000 number on top of the 1250, that question came up and we didn't answer it. And I think everybody left thinking that the 313 was going to go away and that it was only going to be 1250, and we were going to establish a separate lake management reserve fund, and that 1250 was the 54,000 would transfer over to that fund out of Carve. So it's established on its own, and the $12.50 a month was going into that fund. That's what I think our members think. So, and my concern is we've got $3.13 you want to keep down in O&M. Why didn't we just say $18.50 a month and get that not 12, $15.50 a month and get it done all in the fund? See, O&M gets to be played with every year. A fund does not. And I got some real concerns that we weren't real transparent about that during the time that we gave those presentations.
Well, I think just as a rebuttal to that, I think we did not say that it wasn't going away, and we said this was an additional $12.50 that we were going to collect.
I don't recall that.
That's not my impression either. I'm right where Clark was. I thought the $3.50 is going away and it's going to be $12.50 total.
I don't recall us saying that. I think we said, I don't think we directly answered the question. I think we hem-hawed around, made it real nebulous, and because I didn't get the answer to that question during that discussion. And I think that, we got a problem.
I asked in the meeting if those two were both gonna be there, and Jim told me in the meeting, yes. That their 1330 was, or 313 was not going away.
Then I would have, if I'd have heard that, then I would have suggested that we go for $15.50 on the Lake Management Fund rather than $12.50, and get it out of O&M and get it into a reserve fund where it is controlled.
I thought the $3.50 was not going away, but it was going to be included in the $12.50 total amount when we were having that discussion.
Would the minutes reflect what was discussed?
Yes, and if you look at the December 16th minutes, would you like for me to read what was listed in the minutes?
Yes, please.
Okay, under lake improvement, it said Jim Marfus presented resolution number 2019-1 Lake Management Reserve Fund, which will be voted on in the February election. This is the way that it will be on the 2020 ballot. Parentheses, for the future funding of the Lake Management Reserve Fund for the future maintenance improvement of the lake, comma, beginning in July 2020, comma, with the monthly fee of $12.50, parentheses. The monthly fee of $3.13 will be done at the end of June, and if passed, the new monthly fee for LMRF will be $12.50, is what's showing up in the minutes.
There you go.
So, and
that's what I remember.
These are labeled draft minutes, so if there's any difference there, I'd have to go in and look, but this is what I was just able to get my hands on right this second.
I will say, this is Jim Adams, and I will say I was just part of the audience back then, but I had the impression, and which I still think is the case as we look forward, that the $3 that we're talking about would still be is part of the O&M and something for this group to decide upon. And that's really what Jim and Dan are asking us to do, is to decide to keep it in the O&M or not keep it in. They couldn't promise it back then because they couldn't obligate the board to something that like that, the next board. So we just have to decide, do we want to keep any money out of O&M going into lake maintenance?
Why didn't we just up it to $15.50?
Well, we thought that was too big a number to pass, Clark. That's why we went with $12.50.
Yeah, I agree with Jim Adams. I think the intention was that we, as a board, can decide how much in addition to the $12.50 a month we can decide, and it's all part of that regular O&M budget.
I get that. It's not the money. It's the transparency of what we're doing here. to our membership. It ain't got a damn thing to do with the money. I think we need as big of a lake management fund as we can get. I have no problem with that. But I don't think we explained it to our membership that way.
I do recall actually a question from the audience similar to that. And
Again, I was sitting in the audience and I heard what I heard was that it would come to this board that we have now to make a decision of how to use the 50,000 that has built up and how to use, or if we would put any money from O&M going forward. And the 1250 was reserve number. That was my understanding, just listening. And I knew when I come onto the board that I would have to be part of making a decision going forward. Now, how transparent that is, I don't know. It's just my understanding, and I was just a member of the audience. So I'm willing to stand up and make a decision going forward. It doesn't have to be $3. It can be plus or minus that, as long as we stay within the limits.
No, I understand what you're saying. And I'm fine with that. Okay. I would prefer lake management money not to be part of O&M personally. O&M, you can mess with it. Lake management money, you can't mess with it. We rebudget O&M every year. And things get moved around.
And we'll have to rebudget every year how much we spend on lake maintenance. And that's just part of what O&M is.
Yeah, I understand. I get it. Here we go.
Well, I I appreciate the time for you guys,
Are we gonna move this 54,000 to the lake management fund? Because the community voted to establish that fund. So that fund can be, it's a separate fund like ARF now, right?
Right, it's a separate fund.
Okay, we're gonna move this 54,000 to it?
The question is, was that money, we had people come to the board and say that the Lake Management Reserve Fund was not legal because it wasn't voted on by the people. So that's why we rolled them back into Carve. So that's a Carve subset. That's not really a fund per se.
but is
That's
the
still not
board,
answering my question though. That's
What?
not answering my question.
What?
Are we going to roll this 54 into the lake
Well,
management reserve fund?
The question is that money legal to roll in? That's the point.
Why wouldn't it be? We collected it that way.
No, we didn't.
Why would it not be?
Not at the end. We collected it under Carve. So the question is, can you move money out of Carve to go into lake management? That's your question.
Okay.
right. I'd like to hear from Les on that. Les, can you got an opinion on that?
Kind of caught off hand here, but I would be very careful about, I think you're gonna have to treat them as separate funds. I think that 54,000 can be spent on the drainage, the silt ponds out of O&M. But I think your 1250 fund is gonna have to be kept pretty separate, or the IRS is gonna start questioning you about where'd that money come from and why is it there.
Okay.
We'll always be able to tell the IRS where that 1250 came from. And I think it would be dangerous to be putting in or taking out any money out of that 1250 we can't verify went to lake management. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, I think that's adequate. So we just keep the 1250 every month. We put it in into, are we going to call that one the Lake Management Reserve Fund and
Right.
let it build up, and it would be strictly for dredging?
Well, according to the wording on there, it's dredging in. It can be used on things such as lake, the retention ponds and stuff.
Yeah, there's no, as long as it's spent on the lake, my understanding, on the 1250 is fine. If the question is the 54,000 that we carry forward, we're just gonna have to roll that forward in O&M and decide how to spend it,
Right.
just like any other carryover.
Right, it's a
It gets
Hey, Rick.
deposited into CARF. And so when we look at the CARF balance, there's always going to have to be two sub accounts, one called FERF and one called whatever we want to call the 54 now. Silt Pond Fund or whatever. Well, I don't know what you call it. But there's always going to have to be these two sub accounts to CARF, because CARF has got CARF money, and then there's FERF money, and then there's this Silt Pond money.
Right, and I think the thing to do, Clark, on that FARF is to actually vote on the fund the next time we have a vote and make that a fund of its own, you know, and then, or roll.
And that's fine, and that's fine. But this silt money is always going to be sitting there, is it not? And it's going to go up every month by $3.13 or whatever budget number we work out.
Right. And that's for y'all to decide, so. Whether you keep it or not.
Hey, Rick,
Yep.
this Sam,
Yes.
why could we not have line item in the budget for the silt removal? In other words, designate funding for it from this 54,000, and the same for the damn spillway. Have a line item budget, and we designate how much money is going to be in it. And let the $12.50 Lake Management Reserve Fund be exactly what it's supposed to be. The $12.50 is for that. The other will be an O&M, and when we take care of it, we budget it.
I think that's what we said.
Right. I think we're all in agreement there. The one question I have for Charlie, he's got a line item on the screen right now for the dam spillway, 53,000. You say need to budget in CARF.
The CARF number.
Why do we need to budget that in CARF, Charlie?
You don't have to budget, well, because technically we budgeted the first half of it, that 56,550. It was originally began with the Dam Spillway Reserve Fund, which was a subset of CARF. And so that's how we're paying for the first part of it. As Sam alluded to, or a couple other people have talked about, we could put that up in O&M, effectively lower CARF, raise O&M enough to cover that. So you could do it out of O&M or CARF. So, either way it would work fine. It's still all of that rolls up under the less than equal to 5% increase. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so right now the 313, none of that was used to fund this DSRF, right?
Not a penny. No.
That's 350. The reason we did that, Rick and everybody, the dam spillway, is because the spillway thing, we're talking to TCEQ and the Corps of Engineers. If we have to do any upgrade on the dam spillway, having its own fund makes it really transparent to them that we're saving money and we're working on this problem. If you don't show that you're saving money on it, then they don't think you're working on the problem, and then they can push it up where we have to do something immediately, and we didn't want to do that. As long as we're just monitor what we're doing.
Yeah, Jim, your audio was really bad, or either my system was really bad. Could anybody else make out what Jim was saying?
He basically said, can you hear me, Rick?
I can hear you good, yeah.
Okay. Basically, what he said was the reason that was set up as a separate line item is to be able to easily show our members and the TCEQ that we were accumulating funds for this engineering to satisfy the requirements they had put in place for us. So you could just easily point to it and say, here it is. And actually, I've got a letter back from them acknowledging the methodology that we put in place in terms of, we got approval from them about a year ago to do it, part of it this fiscal year, the remaining part next fiscal year. And they said, that's fine. You're demonstrating due diligence. So that was the intention of it, was for a line of sight that you could easily point to it and say, here's where we're accumulating the money, and this is what we're going to do with it. I think we could do a similar thing if necessary. If we, put it under O&M, we could call it, name an account for that, and just, make sure that it's designated that way. So I think one other thing to kind of put this in context, this is our first budget meeting. We have several others scheduled. There is no need to decide anything today. And I think that's important because remember, there's lots of other moving parts in here. I think that the second part of this budget deck is where Jim Adams is going to talk about long-range planning and some of the other potential projects out there. And before we decide anything, I think we got to kind of look strategically and look at the bigger picture. But this is an important slide here. Let me go back over it. There's a remaining surplus of 104,362. Okay, so that could be used for O&M it could be used, we could spend it in the remaining this part of the fiscal year. We need to spend it next fiscal year because we've got to spend it within a 2-year time frame, or it can be rolled over to a fund. The FERF, as Clark alluded to, we've been accounting for that under a subset of CARP. So we've got that money set aside there to use for facilities refurbished, which I think is an important thing to understand. We haven't rated that fund to go out and do other projects. We still have that money because some of that will come due. The Lake Management Reserve Fund, Jim and Dan made their proposal in terms of how that money could be utilized, and that's something that board will need to consider. Then under the Dam Spillway Reserve Fund, the $56,500 that we're collecting, and I'm saying collecting because that'll be through the end of June, that's going to go to Bullock, Bennett and Associates for the first half of the Dam Spillway Engineering Fund. We then need to find the funding for that $53,000 to complete that out. That could either be through a CARF assessment or raise O&M. It could be paid for part of out of the surplus that we've got there. There's a variety of different ways to do that, but that's money that we've got to find funding for that project.
Right. So basically 110 almost $1,000 is the cost of that engineering study. We just split it up over two fiscal years, right?
Yeah, and probably that 53,000 is overstated. I will also say that this is all good news. Is we collected more money this year than we budgeted because the overall lots went from 1,447 up to 1,453. So we gained 6 more lots, and that was due to deconstitutions. So those funds ended up a little bit bigger than we thought, which is great news. So
very good.
Okay, so any questions on that? I think all the board members have that in your packet, stuff to consider. You know, we've got lots of other discussions about it because there are lots of other moving parts. And then if we go to the next section, this is
You muted yourself, Charlie, somehow.
my wife muted me. So, but no, now this is this was put together by Jim Adams. So Jim, you want to take over, and can you drive it from your computer? If you want me to advance the slides, I can do that.
It might be better. Can you show your screen again and then just drive it?
Is my screen not showing?
I don't have it anymore. Well, Maybe you do. Maybe I'm,
I see it.
It is showing.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
I've lost it somewhere. Hang on.
Yeah, there's lots of moving parts here. I've got the slide up that says priorities, long-range planning committee. Is that what everyone else sees?
Yeah.
Hang on. I don't know what happened to mine.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll,
Do you have a copy?
yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I've got it. So you can go ahead and move to the next slide. I just wanted to summarize how the long range planning committee works and what they did last year. But so in 2019 was a survey year where by bylaws we do a survey every other year, and 2019 was one of those years. We took our committee led by Lori Brindle last year. We met regularly and compiled ideas and before the survey and kind of met on those and discussed and debated priorities and that kind of thing. And then we took in the survey and we analyzed that and then used that information to shape the priorities that we had already been working on. So then the committee knew that when they go into it, they're ranking things just based on what they think is most important, not really taking into much consideration the dollar or the dollars related to it. Because we don't have very good estimates at that point. So just kind of setting the priority of what we think the community is asking for and the committee is asking for. So that's how the process worked. What we came up with, next slide, Charlie. One priority that has been out there for at least prior to last year was the guardhouse renovation. So that was a project that was been high on the long-range planning list for a while and just wasn't the top priority. So it still remains as a top priority from the long-range planning committee. During last year, it came up and we talked about it a number of times, improving the golf cart bridges. They just seem to become rough over time. And we talked about that. Charlie was part of some of those committees. I know Charlie has his team working on some different things to smooth out the bridges. And I know I've seen some improvement. I'm not sure exactly where that process is, but it is making improvement. So that's an ongoing priority. One of the priorities that's been out there for some time still also is the East Gate updates, which this may come through ARF, but it is a priority to kind of update the equipment that allows people in and maybe expand the East Gate for quicker access to different vehicles. There was a fitness center item on the priorities, and then continued East and West Beach improvements. Those were the top 5, and anything that I think our long-range planning document that we put out really emphasized those 5, knowing that we probably wouldn't go much past those 5 over the next couple of years. But other items that are out there in the top 10 are expand the driving range, which takes in part of the 50 acres, most likely. A phase 4 of the lodge, which is refurbishing the exterior. Consideration of low water crossing or bridges over low water crossing number 1 or 2 to help again during special storm periods. Pro shop and patio updates. And then it was always on the list as golf course improvements, but that wasn't well defined. It just says that in the plan. And I got a little bit more detail coming on that in just a bit. So next slide, Charlie. So this year we met to confirm that these priorities were still the same, and that's that list that I just went through. The long-range planning committee did confirm that the list should stay the same, and those top couple items are the most important. But we started talking about some emerging ideas, and those would be like a baseball or softball field, possibly related to our acreage area, possibly something down by the dam is possible. The concept of golf course drainage, as you guys all or anybody that plays golf would know, that we've had some drainage issues, especially on number 9 and maybe on a couple of other holes. But number 9, we've been losing for quite a big portion of the year. So maybe we really need to start talking about how to come up with some ideas to help that. And then additional walking paths at the East Beach. And I think that just came up. Is that more evident, especially in the last few weeks, of people getting out, just wanting to walk and be out of their house because everybody's been locked in, but it's always a good idea for exercise. And then an idea that kind of was toyed with last year, but additional trailer storage and trailer and boat storage. So those are just emerging. They didn't hit the priority list. Nobody wanted to reassign these items to the top, but just to keep you guys aware if you want to ask questions. So I think that's all the slides I had. So again, the consensus was priorities are the same. Golf cart bridges, we're assuming that's making some progress through maintenance. The group wants everybody, or our group on the long range planning committee was cognizant that we want to be careful on spending, ensure it's done through our fund savings for these special projects. And then the group understood that there may be some juggling by the board to do the top few items based on funding or just other contributing factors. And then just naming the board, it's myself, Bert Blair, Jim Board, Donna Dietrich, Bobby Frank, Walt Smith, and Larry Wisnot. So thank you for allowing me to share all that.
Thanks, Jim. So I guess one of the big takeaways from that is the spreadsheet we use for project planning and how much car funds we basically need to continue to, particularly on the guardhouse, what the car funds need to be continuing to flow in that.
What number do we currently have on the guardhouse for projections? Charlie,
Spreadsheet.
Last I saw, Charlie had 300,000.
Yes.
Yeah, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 300,000 right now.
And on the project planning sheet, Charlie, what is our estimate in the next fiscal year going into there?
Funding coming in or expenses going out?
Funding coming in.
Well, that'll clearly be dictated by what we decide on with Carve. So let me pull up another spreadsheet here. The other spreadsheet that I sent y'all out. Hang on here a second. It'll take me a minute. I'm having to get out of that presentation. Okay. Let me pull up. This other sheet right here. I hear some kind of echo, so if everybody wouldn't mind going on mute, that would be helpful for. Yeah, that seemed to knock it out right there. Thank you. Okay. Do we have a spreadsheet? Give me a thumbs up on spreadsheet. Okay, good. Thumbs up works great now. Okay. So this is forecasted end of year balances on June 30th, 2020. I've told you my O&M surplus is somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000. I stated that number before the last 3 or 4 weeks that we've had with the lodge being on partial shutdown and everything else that's going on, I still think we should be in pretty good shape with that. Just Carve, the base Carve by itself should be in the neighborhood of almost $50,000. FERF is $194,000. The Lake Management Reserve Fund, let's call that 2019 Lake Management Reserve Fund, should be at $54,869. Dam Spillway should be at $56,500. And then I'm calling it Lake Reserve Fund 2020 just for the heck, so I can keep them different or separate there. And then ARF is going to be sitting at about $313,767. So if I go to the next tab here, once again, here's the fees right here. So let me go to the top up here. This reflects the $2 I put into O&M. This reflects a Carve of $19.88. And this reflects that Carve being inclusive or including contributions to FERF, and then covering the Dam Spillway Reserve Fund. Once again, we could take the money out of the 1988 and put it up in the O&M amount, however much is necessary to do that. So this actually, just the way it's set up here, reflects a rollback, okay, of a 1.21%. If you add in the $12.50 and then ARF goes up to $40, the bridge at $392. So this would be the total monthly assessment. So it goes up by less than the $12.50 amount, but this doesn't contemplate what Dan and Jim had proposed earlier. This is what we would collect. And excuse me, I'm sorry. This is for the first 6 months. So this column H is for the first 6 months. So that's the last half of 2020. And then you've got the next 12 months, but those will be the same rates. Because remember, I told you we're going to do 18 months at the same rates. So at that Carve number, it would raise $173,373. The new Lake Reserve Fund would be $109,013. ARF would be $697. Actually, that's wrong. That's multiplying by 12 months, and it should be 6 months. So it's half of that. I'm sorry. So it's actually about $350,000. I'll have to fix that in the spreadsheet. And then this would be January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2021. So once again, is the O&M would be the same per month. The Carve would be the same per month. The maintenance fee would be the same per month. We would still collect the $12.50 per month. The ARF would be the same. The bridge would be paid off at the end of 2021. So that would drop off in about a little over 21 months from now. And then this will show you Carve during that year, we'd raise $346,000 at that rate. And then at the end of this 18-month period, we'd have almost, what is that, 327,000 in our lake maintenance. And then ARF would be a little over $1 million additional be raised. That's at this Carve number being right here.
So, Charlie, that does not include the $3.13 that Dan and Jim were talking about. And it also does not include the $3.04 a month we need for the dam spillway. The 53,000, right?
Well, it's not broken out separately, but
you rolled it up. You rolled that up into from 1450 to 1988.
Yeah. So if you look,
That's where that is.
If you add up 173,373 plus the 346,747, that gives us $520,000 in Carve over an 18-month period. And you divide or you subtract out the, let's call it $50,000 for dam spillway, that leaves you $470,000 in CARF money. And if you knocked out 300,000 of that for a guardhouse, that gives you $170,000 in CARF money over that 18-month time frame, to do some other, other projects and or FERF and the whole.
So like the silt removal, erosion control, right? Could come out of that. Is that what you're thinking?
That could. You all don't forget the surplus that's still out there. That's not reflected anywhere in here at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
But of your totals going in, basically the 54,000 was in that CARF balance. Is that right?
Yes. I set that CARF number at 1988 to be able to pay for the dam spillway, the second installment of the dam spillway, and 300,000 for the guardhouse. I just stuck that in there as placeholders because the dam spillway we have to do. The guardhouse has shown up for several years as being a priority, and it's also the last several weeks. And one of the things I was going to talk about in the next section is we've had some issues and concerns that have shown up currently with the current guardhouse and our ability to properly social distance ourselves and handle some different things in a proper fashion.
Okay, so my other takeaway, I guess, is that we're, other than the 1250 where we are implementing, we're basically would be going down on our total assessment by 1.21%. Is that what you're showing, right? That's just what I plugged in as a starting point today. And the reason I did that is, and that was before the request, I heard the request for the $3.13 to go into it, was in an effort to try to kind of show you, I don't want to call it a base level because, the guardhouse is an optional project. I think it's a very important project. But the really only thing that's required would be the dam spillway engineering. So I think the good news is we're in solid shape. We've got some flexibility. It's just how much of an appetite do we have for projects, and then how much do we, what do we want to do with the total maintenance fee?
Yeah, I just need a breakdown on CARF, what that 1988 is. I mean, how does that break out amongst all those funds?
Well,
and what are we going to use them for?
There's really no breakout amongst the funds because they're all collapsed into it. As far as I was concerned, well, you could say $3.25 would be the dam spillway reserve fund. That would be included in there. The LMRF I had, going away for the future.
But that's not in the 1988.
That's not in the 1988.
Okay. And then you threw a dollar amount in there for the guardhouse.
Yeah, the guardhouse would be funded out of 12 months of CARF, as would the dam spillway.
So my question is, last year it was 1450. Of that 1450, was the 350 for FERF and the 313 for lake management part of the 1450 or not?
They were separate. They were added on top of the 1450.
Okay, so then what makes up a 1450? Are there things that we're obligated to use that money for? And then do those things, there are new things like that continuing on that we don't want to, it seems like when we collapse it and we're just paying for the guardhouse, I mean, it seems like the 1450 was to pay for something. Was it just the pavilion or?
Yeah, Jim, that's precisely what I'm asking. What are the components of the 1988 and what are we going to spend it on?
Yeah, and that's up to you all to decide. I just put that number together is in an effort to show you what would cover, that would cover the guardhouse and the dam spillway reserve fund. And that would be the extent of CARF that would cover.
But we didn't make any previous obligations out of that 1450 that was from last year that has to carry forward.
That is correct.
Okay. So we can start fresh this year. We can make that number any number we want as long as it stays within the limits, and then spend it on FERF. And well, again, FERF, it seems like money has been set aside and it's to refurbish certain areas. So we shouldn't set that, should continue on because refurbishments continue to be needed in various assets, right?
Yeah, there is. The FERF fund has gotten to be a pretty good number, and we haven't spent money out of it like was originally planned to. So,
Well, but there's some pavilion in FERF,
there is,
and there's some more pavilion in CARF.
and those are contemplated. Let me double check my numbers here. Those are contemplated. If you go back to you see I'm back on the forecasted balance sheet.
Yep.
Okay. The ending June 30th is assuming that the pavilion is done at June 30th and all the bills are paid.
Okay, out of both of those funds.
Yeah, these are forecasted to be after they're paid.
Okay, all right.
'Cause right now, CARF is actually at $406,000 and FERF is at $339,000.
Right.
So what I had Susan do is go through and see where we're at so far in the pavilion. She's done a good job of staying up with that, and then put what the remaining obligations are per the contract in there, and forecasted the balances at the end of the year. The pavilion, we know we're obligated, we're committed, that's going to be finished. The money's already set aside from this. So actually, when you look at it, we'll start the new fiscal 18 months, let's call it, with another O&M surplus potentially of $20,000, CARF in the neighborhood of $50,000, FERF in the neighborhood of $194,000. The money that we collected this current fiscal year to the tune of $54,869, we just heard a proposal on how to spend that money. That money's going to be out there. And then we know how the dam spillway reserve fund needs to be spent because we've already committed to that.
So the 49,000 is undesignated funds that will be in CARF, and there is a substantial portion of the $19.88 that will be contributed to this CARF number every month.
Absolutely.
And then we have another 103,000 of undesignated surplus.
Right.
20.
And my suggestion would have been to put that in CARF, but we can work on that. But so, and CARF would be where we would construct the guardhouse from. And so what you're saying is, of course, when we look at the big spreadsheet at the end of 2021, we don't really have the FERF down at the bottom there. We don't really have the FERF number or the dam spillway number at the end of 2021, but we just got CARF at a balance of 346,000. Is that right?
Yeah, and we really need to, Jim Adams and I need to sit 6 feet apart and go through those spreadsheets. And that's something we really haven't done in a while, we haven't done it since he's picked it up. So all that stuff needs to be synced up because it is a moving target. But yeah. I guess you should see that overall this is pretty good news, right? Or it's real good news.
Yeah, if at the end of 21, you can see where your FERF money is and your dam spillway money is.
And I think that's DAM you're talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So again, I go back to, other than the 1250, your first blush at it, your swag at the 1988 Carve results in a little less than 1% or a little more than 1% decrease outside of the new 1250. So to me, that is good news.
It is.
I don't,
But
you know,
doesn't
in
count the
this-
313.
I'm not hearing anything. Is somebody?
But does not count the $3.13 that's being requested by Jim and
It does not. It does not.
So nowhere in your O&M budget does it say lake maintenance, silt removal or anything, correct?
It does not. There is some money designated in there for riprap and, you know, some other bits, but not to the tune of what they had requested there. So.
So anything else you can cut out of it that we can, you know, we've got the COVID situation, we've got people's incomes are going to be impacted. Is there any more belt tightening that we can also add in some for the lake maintenance?
Well, you know, I think some of the uncertainty that I have in it is I currently have the lodge revenues clicking along at a similar run rate as it was before the last 6 weeks came along. And nobody knows what's going to happen between now and July 1st. Okay. And nobody knows what's going to happen to people's dining habits, or is there going to be pent up demand and they return? At the end of the day, that shouldn't reflect a huge bottom line variance because a large amount of the lodge expenses are variable expenses, which is the cost of goods sold, the cost of the food and the liquor. So if your sales are down, hopefully those are down. And labor cost is also a variable expense, so you can dial that back in. So that's an exposure right there. I think the building permits is another exposure. I mean, that's an unknown. I don't know if you remember from our last treasurer's report that Clark did at the last board meeting, our delinquencies had dropped to a pretty good amount, to a pretty low level that's been there for a while. You know, you'd have to speculate on what's going to happen with payables and delinquencies, you know, over what's happened the last 4 to 5 weeks. That may increase. So I do think there's some unknown factors out there, and it really depends on your budgeting style. Are you a doom and gloomer and make it, you know, so pessimistic, or are you, you know, more optimistic? So, you know, who knows when it's going to be like 2 weeks from now, 4 weeks now, from 6 weeks from now. I would think that if our community comes through in pretty darn good physical shape, medical shape, that we may come close to returning to the new normal fairly quickly. What does the new normal look like in terms of lodge? I don't know. What does the new normal look like in golfing? Hopefully it's not 5 golf carts per round out there, but who knows? I mean, we may be under this for a while. And to me, that's the uncertainty. And that's why I would be hesitant for us to really look at cutting expenses way too much, because, you know, we still need to maintain the golf course. We still need to maintain the roads, and we'll still need to mow and weed eat and do a lot of the stuff we do. We'll still have to have security. We'll still have to send out bills. So there's a lot of the fixed operation things we have to do. So, you know, I think remember is, and I think it's the thought from today would be, this is the first pass at it. Take a look at the numbers, go back and look at it, because, you know, we've got that surplus. We could apply the surplus against, you know, the O&M part here, and that could absorb some of the things that was, requested is some of the silt maintenance, the additional maintenance stuff, the $3.13 could effectively be funded out of O&M with that surplus money, a portion of it. So there's, once again, lots of moving parts there, and there's some flexibility in how you go about in accomplishing that. So we could even lower the overall monthly assessment with that surplus and get closer there. But then again, we've got to be careful. So what I'd like to suggest at this point is think kind of high level here, look at it, do the math calculations and see how the money flows, and then look at the long range planning committee, their strategic needs, and say, what do you think we ought to accomplish the next 18 months? And I think there's a way we can figure out how to pay for those top 2 or 3 priorities.
Okay. So in general, how does the board feel about the direction Charlie's gone so far?
Sam has a question.
Are you there, Sam?
Sam, unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, this is kind of a different fund, I guess you could say. I look back and I see on the ARF fund, every year it looks like it's been increased. We got $1.3 million in it. And I know it's a fund that's there for replacement of things that based on the time and all. But I know we can go up 3 and we can go down 3% on that, even though it may only be $1 or $2. Do we really need to have that much money in there? I looked at things and I see where there's not a whole lot of replacement going on, and yet we got a lot of money just sitting there. I wanted to just bring that up for discussion.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up. There is a certain amount of replacement going on. Fortunately, some of the items have lasted longer than we had originally budgeted. There's a couple of pieces of kitchen equipment that have done that way. Air conditioners done that way. We actually just traded 2 trucks in this year, and they were right on the ARF schedule for the timing of it. We just traded them in this week, and fortunately, they came in under budget, which was great. The biggest reserve in the ARF right now is for the greens on the golf course that's set up for 10 years from now. So that is the biggest chunk of money that's accumulating out there for that. And I think that came about because of when they had to close the course down, what was that, 9 or 10 years ago? When they had to close the course down and scramble to get the funding for it. So that's when the course became part of the ARF. And so it's set up with tees have a line item on ARF, fairways have a line item on ARF, and then the greens have a line item on ARF. So I do think that's something that would be good. A group hasn't looked at it recently, so that would be really Clark is the treasurer taking a look at that and forecasting out. It's a very, very detailed schedule. It's got all of the assets listed, and it's got the replacement. It's got their life expectancy in it, the year that it was purchased, and it's got the money set out there in future years. It also has an inflation component on the bottom, which is probably overstated right now, because I think, with energy costs being low, inflation has been very low too. So that could be looked at. But the biggest thing that's reserving for in the future is for a major renovation of the golf course. And so,
I'm sorry, Charlie. I thought
we did the sand traps out of that, what, a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
A year ago?
Yeah. The thing you got to understand about ARF is there's like 25 or 30 sheets of line items. And these sheets are the big sheets, not legal sheets. They're the big, I don't forget what size they are. But there's line item by line item of items, and they replace at different times. And it goes out there for, like Charlie said, it goes out, what, 10 to 15 years. And so when you need to replace something at what we think the replacement number is out here, it's building that amount over time to get to that number. And so there's a constant, trucks and lawnmowers and stuff like, there's a constant churn inside there. But we do need to, you're right, we do need to kind of look at it and see if there's some fluff in that. But my bet is, because Brent and them just looked at it not too long ago with Norma, and then we moved some items out of ARF and moved their funds out of ARF, because that went into the pavilion as well, because ARF did not need to replace certain things in those restrooms. I think the toilets were in there, the sinks and the faucets and stuff like that was in ARF. And so we moved some stuff out of ARF into, Charlie, wasn't it FERF? We moved those items out of ARF into FERF.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so my bet is there's not a lot of fluff there, as long as you're on those schedules. But yeah, we'll take a look. We'll definitely take a look at it.
Yeah. Believe it or not, Sam.
I guess my point is, I know their schedules, they're set up, but I also know, in fact, we've discussed this before, the ice machine at the lodge, it's already passed the schedule. However, it has not been replaced, but yet the money every year is just being carried over. How many other items do we have that are past the schedule to be replaced, and yet the money is just sitting there, and we're still charging the dues that were increased to pay for this to the residents? I'm thinking about the fact that we cut back on some of this. If it's not necessary, we ought not be having to pay the dues to do that.
Well, when we put off the ice machine, we actually move it forward to the next year in the spreadsheet, and then move the replacement out that much further. That trickles down, it all calculates out. And then you look at kind of the doomsday year, which is 2030, and that's when we have the golf course greens in there. Last time I looked at the current rate, it was pretty close to zero. Okay. And so we can't, it is adjusted. It's something that's looked at on an annual basis. And it's not money that goes away. We push it out there. But believe it or not, so far through February of this year, we've spent $335,000 of ARF money, and we budgeted $346 for that time period so far. But overall $800,000. So we may only spend 60% of it, this year, but then the rest of it's pushed out. But I think that's a good point, Sam, is we can go out and look at it. The dilemma with it is, if you stop it or roll it back right now, you get behind really quick. And then we would have a crisis, if the golf course needed to be done. But, that's exactly the purpose of these discussions this time of year, for the board to look at and try to forecast what they think the most likely, future is, next year, 5 years, and 10 years out there. So.
I guess my point would be, Sam, that is not static money that just keeps sitting there. It rolls.
Yeah, I brought it up just so that we would look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Charlie, could you take your spreadsheet and scroll down so we can see those last 3 or 4 funds instead of the top of your spreadsheet? Oh, well, I guess you can't get rid of the top part.
Well, you need the top part to see what you would do. Oh, you mean
well, where it says, yeah, the green part and all that kind of stuff.
No,
I don't know if there's I guess you can't do that.
The way this is set up, it's a little bit quirky. I mean, this is,
Yeah. So really, where'd you get your $40? Was that just your best estimate on what Ways and Means would request, or?
It's actually decided by the board, to be honest with you. So the board will decide on what it is, and that's based on what what we look at. If you go back a couple years, I mean, we kept it flat as we're increasing lots. We went up here a little bit, we went up here a little bit. One of the years out here, I forget which one it was. I think it was 17, 18. We spent 350 on roads, 350,000 on roads out of ARF, and Ways and Means suggested we go back to 250,000. So with 22 miles of roads, it's almost hard to have too much ARF money, out there, because that's a drop in the bucket for major road issues. So, and that's another thing is, that the previous boards wanted up the road spend that year to 350. Ways and Means thought that was a little bit over the top, so we had to do some more out of O&M. So I guess for the new board members, or even if it's your second gyration now, you understand there's multiple buckets of revenues coming in. There's reserve funds, there's O&M funds, there's carryovers. So there's lots of moving parts here, and you've got to decide how you want it to all come together. I think that, really what may make sense is saying, okay, what do we as a board want to, come up with the overall bottom line monthly membership assessment to be, including the $12.50 for the lake fund. Do we want to try to get it as close to the current year one as we've got, or do we want to go up, more than $12.50?
So Charlie, in one of our orientations, it seems to me like there was a contingency fund.
Yep.
Is that reflected anywhere here? And is that something we need to take into consideration, especially with the COVID issue?
We're required by the bylaws to have minimum of 3%, which is what we've carried right now. And then you can go up to as high as 4%. So if anything, I mean, you could vote to fund the contingency at a higher level than it currently is, but not a lower level than it currently is. And basically that is untouchable money as far as, I'm concerned. I've never even got close to touching it. That would be out there in the necessity of a very major emergency. And it's my understanding that would be used if we had a major catastrophic physical loss out here, and we had to take and put some money out before we got our insurance checks back. That would be used for that emergency, and then we get, insurance checks back, and we repay that fund, because we're supposed to have at least 3% in the contingency at all times. So, I mean, if anything, the board could vote for it to go up. I don't know that that's necessary. So, but that is something they could do. But it's money out there. And actually, up until this point, the increase of it on an annual basis, which is required as the budget gets bigger, has been funded solely by the interest that is collected on that fund. So the interest rates we've been getting paid has been higher than the budget has gone up. So we haven't even had to really fund it the last couple of years. Now with interest rates softening up right now, that might be, a different story.
So Charlie, as I understand it, that's a fund that goes across fiscal years, right? So, and it's just sitting there as part of our overall assets. You don't have 3% of the current budget accruing somewhere, do you?
There is 3% of our current budget sitting in a bank account across the street or in downtown Gainesville.
It's a balance. It's not accrued.
Yeah, we've got $147,459 in our contingency reserve account as of the end of February 2020. We also, just as a side note, we've got $132,143 in security deposit reserve. That's for leased lots and leased houses out here. Each one of those, well, most of them, it's $1,000 deposit. There's some others that are from way, way, way back when that are like $500 deposits. So that's money that we have in the bank. We're collecting interest on, but it's not our money. So it's, you can't touch that one. The contingency would be is if we had some form of catastrophic issue came in through here and we needed some temporary funding, and then that would need to be paid back. So for budgetary purposes, it's really a non-issue. It's out there. Unless you wanted to raise it up to 4% for some reason, which you could do. I mean, in fact, we could do that with the surplus just overnight, but I don't know that we need to do that. I think, there's be better uses for the surplus.
Okay, so I guess back to the overall question, do you feel in general, what's your goal here to keep the total monthly assessment at $260, including the $1250, or $270, including the $1250? What are we thinking here?
I think there's a lot more questions to be answered before we can decide that.
Yeah.
And a lot more review.
I think the purpose of the overall big picture is to give Charlie direction on what he better kind of aim at, So certainly the cost of the guardhouse and those Carve fund balances in the long-term project planning spreadsheet will affect the ARF assessment or CARF assessment. But other than that, I don't know, do we want, I guess the second question is, do we want to allocate money straight from the 2018, 2019 surplus to something like silt removal and not include $3 or whatever it would be in the O&M fund? So I think that would be a good use of some of that surplus, so that we don't have to add the 313 back into CARF.
Or the other thing is you could allocate it all to to a portion of the guardhouse, and then add the 313 back in. I mean, there's different ways to get to the same place.
Yes, exactly.
So the other bit, and let me go back, and since we're on it, let's talk about the guardhouse for a second, because that's a big project. That's something since I came here 6 years ago, it's been on the project. It's been on the list. It's something that we've had heightened awareness of these last 4 weeks, and some of the guards have expressed concerns by the way that it's designed. So members have had to, in the past, members have come in to get boat stickers and stickers for their cars. And in this day and age, we can't maintain the 6-foot social distancing with it, and that's a concern. So we're trying to go to an electronic version of that. The original plans that we looked at, which we didn't fall in love with, and I'd like to go a different direction on, has a small vestibule or waiting area that the guests would be able to then come in there. There would be a very small waiting area, but it'd have air conditioning and heat. They could most likely fill out a form on a computer. They'll do a touch screen and it'll go over there, but then it'll have a glass window, not too dissimilar what we've got in the POA office. So there's not face-to-face contact. You've got a glass in between there. Some of you, if you've been to any retail outlets recently, Buc-ee's has it, or I heard Tom Thumb has it. Some of the grocery stores have put plexiglass up between the cashiers and the customers. So something to separate them. We may have to have a small pass through there, some way to pass things back and forth, and then sanitizers. The other big issue right now is the amount of face-to-face contact time the guards have to have with visitors driving up through to the window there. So the people come out and saying, I'm Smith here to see the Joneses, okay? So there's a back and forth, and they're having to, get a card and hand them a card, and then the visitor drives off in that. We've got a number of people out here that your children may have the plastic cards. In the past, they've come up, given it to the guards have swiped it, and it says go or no go, and then they hand the card back. Right now, what we've done is modified it, is so they'll just hold up the card, and the guard will look at it and let them go in, because we don't want to swap that back and forth. We have all the contractors and everything, so it's just not designed for, the type of social distancing that we do that we're practicing now. Who knows, will that be a requirement in 6 months from now? It may or may not be, but I do think that we've got a plan on it, getting better. The other interesting thing is with, the way the economy is right now, it might be a reasonable time to get bids on, or get a project design and get bids on it, because there may be some construction supply, so to speak, that would make it more cost effective now than it was 6 months or a year ago. So that's just
So I really don't hear anybody, disputing the need for it or wanting to throw it out right now. So
okay.
I personally, I think we need to really tighten the belt right now, and just, I'm liking about where you are at the 270 number right now. That includes the 1250 overall, a decrease of everything except if we factor out the 1250. Any other direction for Charlie from anybody?
Our next meeting is scheduled for the May 18th. So excuse me, I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. April the 20th, right? That's our next budget meeting at the board meeting.
Yes, April 20th is our regular board meeting. It's
Right.
not a budget meeting.
Right. This budget meeting was originally scheduled next Monday, April the 6th. I was going to be out of town, but I'm going to stay here. That's why we separated the budget meetings 2 weeks from the board meeting, but we typically do a component of it. So at that point in time, I can supply and I could even do it ahead of time. Well, I'm going to be out next week. I could do it the next week of April the 13th, of being able to give you department detail, line by line, month by month, and that'll show how I rolled up to that $213.88. I then can go back and Clark asked about, how did you get to this CARF number? Actually backed into, 300,000 for the guard shack and 50,000 for the engineering. That's kind of how I got to that number. But then I think what's been introduced is the $3.13 monthly, or an ongoing, lake maintenance deal to pay for out of O&M. I think that's something we can look at. And then the surplus is probably the other big deal out here, is how we want to use that surplus.
I think that's right. That covers the questions.
Yeah, I have questions. I mean, something's going away. Obviously, nothing's going away in O&M. It's going up, and so then things are going away in CARF, which was just an arbitrary number. But FERF, I guess, stays the same. And what was planned in that fund? I guess I'd like to see what else in that. And then we have kind of this arbitrary. It's not arbitrary. There's the asset replacement that arbitrarily has gone up 75 cents. Well, it seems like if we have all those spreadsheets, it should tell us what that number should be. I mean, based on, why would it go up if we're constantly moving on and off the equipment or assets that we own? It seems like it should naturally, and maybe that's what the $40 is just the latest version of that.
Yeah, it's pretty close to that. And once again, it really, the biggest variable is the inflation factor that was put in. And, that's something that you kind of go, what do you put in for inflation for the next 10, 20 years? So it's a question mark. So, but yeah, I've got all that. As Clark alluded to earlier, it prints out and it's not quite as many pages as he mentioned, but it's 11 by 17, and the font's pretty darn small. And it's front and back on some of them, so there's a lot of detail to follow through and look at it. And I'll be happy to get those ready. And also, you talked about the FERF. We'll look at that. And that was something that was put together. Really, Keith Cole helped drive that. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, and put it out there. And that's something that we can look at it, making adjustments on as well.
And what's the difference? I mean, I've heard you say FERF is like carpet and things like that, or air conditions, but isn't that what ARF is too? That's where I would get confused.
ARF is assets, FERF is facilities. So an asset would be like a fryer or a truck that you can plug in and plug out. The facilities would be like paint, carpet, ceiling, light fixtures, roofing, and things that we don't have on the ARF schedule. And that's why it was created, because there was a void there. An example right now is that I believe the carpet in the dining room in the 19th hole is probably getting ready to be replaced. And that would come out of FERF. And, there's things that'll be, that happen on it. The interior of the lodge will need to be completely repainted, and there may be some woodwork that will need to be done in 3 or 4 years from now.
So an item that's on the long range plan further out is refurbishment of the exterior of the lodge. Would that fall under FERF, or will it fall under ARF, or is it a capital expenditure?
Well, it would, it's not, there's not money set aside in ARF, so it would have to be, that would be under FERF, or it would go through it would go through some kind of special funding, either surplus money or whatever. But yeah, that would be a good FERF. That would be a good example of FERF.
Or CARF. Could that be a CARF project as well?
It could be a CARF project as well. So particularly if you added new stone and things like that. Another example is we've got some bids on the pro shop to replace all the windows in the pro shop. I don't know if you've seen those windows, or put in 20 years ago, and they were really cheap windows, and a lot of them have voided. Windows would be another example of FERF. So it's really, we don't have those on an asset schedule, but that's something that does need to be taken care of over the years. So once we get all those sheets, and then you start looking at them and you lay them out, then they tend to make a little bit more sense.
So FERF has a line item list too?
There is. It's not as well defined as ARF, but it is out there. So, and it hasn't been updated in a while, but that's something that does need to be looked at. So.
Okay.
And Charlie, do you typically run the ARF numbers by Ways and Means before we actually vote on it?
Yes.
I have a question.
Jim?
So the Human Resource Committee is considering some expenses. Has any of that been considered in what you've put together so far, Charlie?
Yeah, what I put in there contemplates the payroll increase number of 1% over an 18-month period, and then also the 1% on the 401k. It doesn't contemplate the sick pay component of it, but that would be this fiscal year issue, not a next fiscal year issue. Okay, any other questions on budget?
No, so hearing none. Let's see, I guess we've got some questions from the audience that people sent to Leanne. Let's try to answer those now and take a couple of minute recess, have Leanne stop I guess we would need, after we answer the questions, maybe we need a motion to go into executive session and have her stop video. So is that okay to answer the questions now, Charlie?
Yes.
All right, let me read them off. So from Dorothy Bradley, lot 947, will you be stopping the fee for dredging until after the COVID-19? So no, I think that's, again, we talked about that kind of earlier. It was voted on by the community, and I don't think we need to delay that at that time. I understand there's financial consequences out there of COVID-19, and so we'll look at our O&M budget to try to tighten the belt. Charlie, you got anything on top of that?
No, I think you said it well.
Let's see. I'm going to let Charlie answer this one from Dave Slack, lot number 692. Is it really necessary to keep classified ads off the NABR network at this time?
The simple answer is no. Some of you may realize that we took away some of the posting ability on Neighbor Network. And this was something that years ago when we made the switch, and it was years ago now, when we made the switch to Neighbor Network, they go, oh, you've got this great posting ability and people can go out and post on it. So the communication committee has had taken the position a while back that our official communication channels are the gate signs, the website, constant contact, and communicate. So, and I don't think I'm missing anything there, but our communication channels are not social media like Facebook and Nextdoor, okay? So consequently, the majority of our communication is typically more of a one-way communication. Think it more like broadcasting, radio or TV or the whole bit. So now they have kind of a call-in component. What we saw here in this emergency situation, we were posting a number of very important announcements out there related to COVID, guidelines, recommendations, rules changes, and the whole bit. And there was a lot of other postings being done out there, and it was two-way, and it became kind of a social media bit, and we felt like it diluted the messages, the important messages that we were trying to get out there. So, and that was a concern that the communication committee had way back when, because we didn't want our website to become a social media where people could put opinions out there. Okay, and it's not meant for opinions, it's meant to be facts and directives from us. So that's it. We do think, in terms of classifieds, we think that's an important part of it, and we'll come up with a solution, and it'll go through an administrator, either Leanne or Scott. We'll have to post that classified the classified, ads out there. But that's also good because that does, allow us to put another level of our security on it out there. So I think we can work through that.
Okay.
Rick,
yeah, that was his specific question, was the classifieds.
Rick, did you get the updated questions that Leanne just sent out?
Yeah, we've got two more. So
Okay, great. Okay.
Says the third one says from Jamie Larkin, lot 772, to create more transparency of the board and the POA, can you set up a 24/7 online question and answer link on the Lake Kiowa website to submit questions to the board?
Who wants the midnight to 8 a.m. shift?
Yeah, I was wondering, how many of those questions are we? And does anybody get paid enough to respond to those all the time?
Yeah.
I think it might be a good thing to allow people to ask questions, but we can't really answer them until we all gather as a board, and they're posed as questions to the board at the next board meeting.
Yeah, it depends on how many there were. I wouldn't want to have to go through 100. So,
True that.
We do have, I don't know, what are you doing right now about coffee with Charlie? Is that on hold, I suppose, Charlie?
Yes, along the lines of the board meeting, it is clearly on hold. I guess we could, I think we could do Zoom with Charlie. So as I'm growing more comfortable with this, we could do that. But I think that, from my perspective is, we almost answered that with this session here, where we communicated to people saying, hey, send us your questions ahead of time and we'll address them and answer them. And so from this perspective, this part will be in the recorded minutes. It'll be in the written minutes. And I think that's good. That's what we try to do. And ideally, remember what we're talking about before with our real life board meetings, we were talking about coming up with the forms where we can collect their questions and comments in writing before they're able to express it verbally. So then we have a written document, which is better than just a verbal document. So one of the things we try to do here, and Rich is one who deals with a lot, is, hey, if you've got a question or concern, send it to us in writing. Then you have a record that you sent it to us. You can hold us accountable for it. And then once we see it in writing, it's easier for us to act upon. So I think maybe that's the way we go about it with this, is that it's questions to the board and we accumulate them like this. And then the answers would be in the minutes or the recording. So.
Yeah, and I would say that I would say that a lot of people, they know our email addresses, they're in the communique, they send us questions fairly often during the course of a month. And usually Jim Marfis last year would respond to those once he had time to confer with some of the other board members or Charlie. So that we've already gotten 3 or 4 like that here in the last few weeks.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Last one's again from Jamie Larkin, number 772. Are we going to need additional parking? This is at the pavilion. Are we going to need, if there's only 171 parking spaces and the capacity of the new pavilion with the lodge is 550. So how will you meet the need? So it's a good question. Of course, a lot of people come in their golf carts or boats or things like that, but got any, maybe Clark knows on that one. I don't know.
I hadn't even thought about it. We're going to take away with the new pavilion, that we're going to take away about 2 or 3 parking spots down there across from the entry door, down by the entry patio. You've got your golf cart parking, but there's 2 or 3 car parking spots all the way down and on the right across from the golf cart parking. And we're going to take 2 or 3 of those away. So because we will cut through that part of the parking lot there. We will make, that corner will come off a little bit, and we will make room for about 2 or 3 more golf cart parking spaces over on that side. But we're going to lose 2 or 3 car parking spaces, auto parking spaces on that side. But I don't think I've ever seen it full. Have you, Charlie?
Well, the only issue would be July 4th, and that's not going to change July 4th. Parking will be at a premium. So
yeah,
I think, hopefully there'll be 2
we
and
always
4.
put the carnival in that parking lot. So.
Right. Hopefully by then 2 and 4 people will be back riding in golf carts, because if it's 1 per golf cart, we're gonna have a big problem. But we can't have events, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so until we take to the new normal. So that's a good question. I think that July 4th, we find a way to squeeze it in and people park on, across the way and the whole bit. But that's,
it's a good question. I think one we need to probably measure from here on out.
right.
Yeah, but I can't think of any available space right now, right around there, unless we're cutting away from the putting green or something like that. So.
Well, we could
Okay.
call a condemnation on that first house right there.
There you go. That sounds expensive. Okay. All right. Can we have a motion to go into executive session?
But you wanted to take a break, right? Or you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we need a motion to adjourn this portion?
I think that's what we need.
Charlie, did we want to talk about this security list?
Yeah, but I think we're going to talk about that in the executive session, right? Because that's related to COVID.
Okay.
I move that we take a break and return to executive session. After.
Okay, and I'm gonna suggest at 4:15, so we all got 6 minutes. So do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Steve, looked like. All in favor, raise your hand. Say aye. Something. Jerry,
Aye.
are you there still? All right. Okay, so moved. Let's cease the record.